Welcome back into the shop. Last time I finished up the base, and now I want to finish up the top. Each one of these boards was just a hair too wide for my finished 36-inch top, so I had to rip a little bit off of each side of my 2-panel assemblies. Now I'm going to joint that last edge and glue my 2-panel assemblies into one 4-board assembly. I've got the joiner plane set pretty heavy here to quickly flatten out the entire face. The key is to just keep checking it with a square. If it starts to go a little out of square, you want to correct it before it gets too crazy, because then you've got a lot more work to fix it. I'll lighten up my joiner plane a little bit to kind of a medium light cut, and then come back and take full length passes again, and then come back and check another time with the square. Keep checking with that square. Don't let it get out of control, because it's so much harder to fix. Finally, I came back with my smoothing plane set to about the thickness of the dust on a gnat's wing. Real light cut, and just finesse that edge and get a beautiful glue surface. Plus, who doesn't like to play with these wispy thousands of an inch shavings? Little bit of hide glue, couple of clamps, and with a good joint, you really don't need that many clamps over this surface. Now with the top glued up, I'm ready to move on to the breadboards. We're starting to see what the table's going to look like. Now, quick a step back to my shop in Maryland, and before I left, I created these 36-inch long, 4-inch wide breadboards, and I sunk a groove that is a 1/2 inch deep and a 1/2 inch wide along the inside of both of these. Now back up to the main shop, and I'm using one of those quick clamping guides that you see used with circular saws a lot. I set it square to the long edge of the table, and I'm knifing in the shoulder line. I'm setting the shoulder line in about 2 1/4 inches from the end. I know that my tenons need to be 2 inches long, but I didn't bother to cross-cut or square up the ends of the table. It's not necessary at this point. Now, deep knife line is key because it allows you to come in and use a chisel to create this first-class saw cut. We want this shoulder line to be dead to nuts accurate. So anything we can do to help when the sawing comes along will be really beneficial. I've set my Mortise Gage to create a 1/2 inch thick tenon all the way along the end of this board. And again, you can see I didn't really bother to square or shoot the end of the table. It's just not necessary. Now, with my breadboard actually set up as a batten, I can use it as a fence and my halfback saw to saw down the shoulder. I'm sawing to my marking lines, but again, it's about, I'd want to say about a 3/4 inch deep cut to get to that 1/2 inch tenon. Now I'll come back with a wide paring chisel and just whack away. You can remove some of this waste very easily, like the real straight grain stuff. When you start chopping, you'll see it just pops right out like this stuff here. And on the other end, as we're working on this rift sawn stock, you can see just how easily it separates away. In fact, I can go back and work much closer to my line because I can count on how the grain is going to split with the chisel. Now, there are other areas like where this knot is that are a lot more difficult. So I have to take a little lighter cut, and I kind of have to chip away at it, literally, to get down to the line. If I try to take too heavy a cut, it's liable to go below my line. Now in those tough areas, I came back with a block plane and set to a light cut, just kind of clean them up and level them out. Now I can come back with my skew rabbet plane. This is a 2 1/2 inch wide skew rabbet plane. Nice vintage plane that is used to clean up and bring the entire cheek into line. Now I've laid in the tenons, and I've got 3 tenons on here that are 4 inches wide and 2 inches long. I laid in a line a 1/2 inch from the shoulder. This is gonna ride in that groove. So once I saw it out the end with the halfback, I can come in and actually saw the tenon shoulders and free that out. And you can see that 1/2 inch stub, we'll call it, or haunch, is what actually rides in the groove and what helps to keep the tabletop flat. The longer tenons that extend 2 inches out is what makes for a really strong joint with the breadboard. Now remove the waste in the middle. I'm going to come back with a coping saw and just kind of make that swooping cut in. and work down along the baseline. Now you noticed I'm going just to the inside of my crayon line here because the crayon is obviously not that accurate and it just needs to ride in the groove. I don't want it to bottom out in the groove. And if I have to trim that later because it's preventing the breadboard from coming up tight, that's going to be kind of difficult to get in there with a plane and trim away just a little bit in between tenons. So it's best to go with caution and saw to the inside of that line. Now I'll bring my breadboard up, slide the tenons into the groove, and mark the shoulders. Now the center tenon is set so that it exactly matches, the mortise rather, exactly matches the width. The outer two tenons are made to be 1/4 of an inch wider in both directions. So the total mortise is 1/2 inch wider. This will allow the board, the whole tabletop, to expand and contract around that central tight-fitting tenon. This is the secret behind breadboards that allow expansion and contraction while keeping the tabletop flat. Now it's over to mortise those out. And you can see my body stance here. I'm standing off the end of the breadboard so that I can see that I'm chopping square as I work through that mortise. Now, yes, I'm using a metal-tipped carver's mallet here on this wooden chisel. It's not something I would recommend, and I did actually pay for that by splitting my handle on the final mortise. I knew better than that, but for some reason that's the only mallet I brought. Anyway, this is typical mortising technique. Just work your way down slowly using the wedging action of the chisel and pulling that material out. Because the groove is already set, it's really pretty easy to sink these mortises. Most of the side-to-side motion is set in place because that groove, that 1/2 inch groove, really sets the direction of the chisel. And now finally, we go for the fit. I had to do a little bit of finessing of the shoulders and the tenon links and everything, but this is the fit that I'm looking for. It's really hammer tight on the tenons, and that shoulder just closes up and disappears. Beautiful, tight, and a flush fit across the entire tabletop. I just had to do one more of these. And here's a look at the kind of sort of finished table. My customer pulled a last-minute change on me and decided to close up her house in Maine for the winter before I was able to finish it and deliver it to her. Initially, I was kind of stressed out about this because I wanted to get it done. She, however, said, "No big deal. I'm not going to be back up to my place until July of next year anyway, so you can finish it sometime next summer." So sorry to leave you hanging, guys, but that's what I'm going to do. I've left it where it is. All I've got to do at this point is come back, peg the breadboards, and apply finish. The tabletop itself is attached with 4 bronze screws that are fit through elongated holes in the stretchers. I'll be sure to show you how all that works when I head back up to Maine. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this build. The final and 5th part, it's coming, but probably not till next summer.